All right. Good evening again. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good to have all of you and those who will be viewing this online. Good evening. What I'm beginning today is not even a beginning, it's a continuation. We're continuing the 21 questions every Christian should be able to answer. And so I've chosen this particular one for us to look at this evening. Why does God allow suffering and evil? Why does God allow suffering and evil? I don't know. This is one of the most familiar questions people ask, Christians and then unsaved in particular. Unsaved in particular who are looking for God to do something and then it doesn't happen the way they use it as an excuse to say, "Boy, I don't want any part of your God. Why didn't your God stop this?" You know, the Uvalde shooting in Texas, 19 children killed and 2, adults, teachers. And people ask those questions. Why did God have to allow that to happen? Could God have prevented it? Could God have just stopped that killer in his tracks? Yes, he could have. And so when tragedies like those happen, trials and tribulation and suffering, when especially the young die young, when some unforeseen circumstances happen to some people, people ask this question. And we need to be able to answer this question properly and carefully without seeming as if our God is unloving and uncaring, but without seeming as if God himself doesn't know what he's doing. And without making it seem as if things are taking God by surprise. We have to answer this carefully. And without also seeming cold and callous, and insensitive towards other people's feelings, situations too. So it's a question that you can't just answer with just 2 sentences and done. So we want to be able to do justice to this. And so we are going to look at this idea of why does God allow suffering and evil. Next slide, please. So, in order to do so, we need to look at what trials are and sufferings are. So, a trial is the process of proving the quality or worth of something or someone. All right? This is looking at it from the God's perspective, the biblical perspective. Trials are not easy, they are not good, but notice already we're putting things into perspective. You're having trials and you have some trials that are really rough and hard and tragic. A trial is the process of proving the quality or worth of something or someone. And trials are tests of your faith, my faith, our faith. It is a test of our patience and it is a test of our endurance through the process of suffering. All right? Sometimes some people don't like to hear these things. All right? So there are 3 primary Greek words that are translated as trial in the New Testament. Each has a slightly different emphasis in meaning, yet they all reveal God's purpose for trials and suffering. So we're going to look at these 3 words and then we're going to bring out some more things as we seek to answer why does God allow suffering and evil. All right, so here goes. The first Greek word is dokimeon, which means proven faith. Proven faith. This is a testing trial in which your faith is proved genuine. To see if you really are a child of God or not. To see if your roots are dug deep. All right? So there's dokimeon, which is a proven faith, a testing trial in which your faith is proved genuine. And 1 Peter 1 verse 7, in fact, the King James says it. In fact, let me read both. Let me go to the King James first. There are some that I like the King James better at, and then others. This is a different version I have on screen, but there are some I like the King James on that says it more clearly, and others say other things more clearly. 1 Peter 1 verse 7 says that the trial, King James Version, of your faith being much more precious than of gold that perisheth, meaning gold perishes, all right, when it is being purified and so forth, gold will perish, though it be tried with fire, might be found unto praise and honor and glory at the appearing of Jesus Christ. Another version here says it, these, meaning the trials, have come so that your faith of greater worth than gold, your faith is of greater worth than gold which perishes even though refined by fire, may be proved genuine and may result in praise, glory, and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So, when we go through trials, it's proving our faith. And there's coming a day when God will reward us if we handle our trials well. All right? It is going to prove that we're children of God. And it's going to prove that our roots and our faith is grounded in God. So there's a second one. And when you look at that Greek word, it means refined character. But look at the Greek word. I'm going to pronounce it. Some Greek scholars may pronounce it purosis. Some others may say purosis. Whether purosis or purosis, what does that sound like to you? What kind of... Thank you, exactly. Some of these Greek words, Latin words, as you will know, and even a few Hebrew words, you can hear the English coming out of them. And so it speaks of a kind of purifying process. Indeed, that's the Greek word. It refines your character. So when you go through trials and when you go through suffering, it refines your character. It's a fiery trial through which your character is refined as gold is refined. And it, of course, implies suffering. So 1 Peter 4 verse 12 says, do not be surprised at the painful trial you are suffering, as though something strange were happening to you. Peter is reminding us, and quite a bit of the Peter verses, especially 1 Peter, the book of 1 Peter, talks a lot about trials, and reminds us that we will go through trials, and then this is one is now telling us that don't be surprised, think it not strange, don't be overly, anxious or even surprised that you're going through trials. Jesus told us about these things. He told us that those that live godly shall suffer persecution. We cannot escape it. So don't be surprised at the painful trial you're suffering as though something strange were happening to you, because the trial that you're going through is going to refine your character if you let it. It can refine your character or rip your character. It can refine your character, or if you let it, it ruin your character. So it is how you handle it. And a statement is going to be made shortly to that. So let me wait until I get there. Thirdly, we're looking at the different kinds of what you call trials, or used in the Greek there. We talked about proven faith. We talked about refined character. And then there's this one, tested commitment, which is perasmos. All right? Perasmos. All right? Tested commitment. This is a trial or temptation through which the quality of your commitment is tested. James 1 verse 2 to 4 says, consider it pure joy, my brothers, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Perseverance must finish or accomplish its work so that you may be mature and complete and you're not lacking anything. So there are these usages of the word trials and sufferings that even just the meaning of them alone brings out what God is trying to do with our trials. He's either testing our commitment, he's either proving our faith, or he's either refining our character. But a lot of the times, Christian or non-Christian, when we are going through these tragic situations, because some trials are worse than others, some trials are harder than others, When we have a tragedy, such as loved ones dying suddenly, being killed and all of that kind of stuff, those are trials that people struggle to see the sense and the purpose, and even to see a loving God. And that's why this question is continued to be asked, and it is going to be asked even after this. Even if we settle it here, somebody new will come to you and ask, why does God allow evil and suffering in this world? Why doesn't he just kill off or either change the bad people into good? Or why doesn't he just let the justice rain down and that we can have, a good society. If you notice, when people ask that question, they are putting everything on God, and there's no personal responsibility. All right? So we're going to look at personal responsibility. We're going to look at the attitude. What is your heart attitude towards trials? When you go through trials and suffering, what is your heart attitude? It says here, and I like this, very profound. The mere presence of pain is not a promise that you will grow and mature. And I like the other sentence that backs it up. The trial itself does not produce growth. Wow. The mere presence of pain is not a promise. It's not a guarantee. It's not an assurance that because you're going through trial, you must grow and you must mature. The trial itself is not the growth process. The trial itself does not produce growth. What produces growth? It is your attitude and response toward the trial that determines what God can accomplish in your life. So a lot of the times, we would have even said it, trials, make you better. But why isn't it making some people better? Instead, it makes some people bitter. So it's not the trial. It's the attitude towards the trial. And that's what we need to zero in on when we try to answer this question. Why does God allow trials and sufferings and pain and all of that kind of stuff? What is God trying to do? What is God using the trial to do? What is your heart attitude towards it? So here's a question. Do you resist God's grace by bitter murmuring and complaining, or do you respond with a humble heart? So what we're about to look at when we talk about the heart attitude towards trials, we're going to look at two aspects. We're going to look at the bitter heart and the humble heart. The bitter heart is always bad. The humble heart is always good. We're going to be looking at some of the other follow-up questions that come with this overarching question. Why does God allow suffering and evil? There are some other statements or questions that come with it. And so we're going to look at them now. This is what the bitter heart says. The bitter heart says, how could a God of love allow so much suffering? You ever heard somebody say that here yet? Yeah, man, very common. The question even deeper is, were you there at one point? Some of us were there at one point, Christian or non-Christian, where we ask, how could a God of love allow so much suffering? When we get some of these questions asked, when you're at the funeral service of somebody beloved, or sometimes even, I've been to a funeral for a child once, and the parents were just really angry, angry at God and so forth, and they're asking these questions. When some people are just snuffed out, you said, boy, this person is too young to die. Why? Why did God? So how could a God of love allow so much suffering? That's what a bitter heart says. But here's what a better heart says, a humble heart. God's ways are always just. He never does wrong. We have to remember that He is a God of love, a God of mercy, grace, and justice, and so forth. So Deuteronomy 32 verse 4 is a reminder that He is the rock. His works are perfect, meaning His ways, His actions, His plans, whatever God does, it is perfect. And all His ways are just. That means right, and righteous. A faithful God who does no wrong. He is a faithful God who does no wrong. And He's upright and He's just. So, even this might not convince some people, but you have to, as you answer the question, you have to keep drenching them with the word. Sometimes it is not enough to just give them your own opinions. You have to keep, yes, is that a hand? Yes. All right, go ahead, Maisel.
Okay, so my question is, I'm talking about a Christian, all right? So that Christian knows that a loving God allows certain things to happen, but this person is still bitter when certain things happen. You will never hear the person said, how could a God of love allow such suffering or allow me to go through these trials? But yet, when these things happen, the person is bitter. how do you explain a situation, or what do you think about this person?
Yeah, yes, Josh, you wanted to answer. What?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily an answer, but as in putting it in another terms of understanding is like, you as a Christian, you know how the whole ordeal works of God allowing things. Well, as in, you know that God is not unfair, you know that He's just, and you know He never does wrong. But I think it's the case of like, as a Christian, you go through different things, heartache, failure, trauma, whatever it is. At the end of the day, you still have that emotion of feeling bitter because, you know, as a person, you go still feel that. And I don't know if you would necessarily be answering the question, but the thing is, with us as Christians, so, well, I wouldn't necessarily say it's being something
You know, you're too giving yourself away, right? It's almost like we don't know who not talk about here. you know. So me answer both of you. Me as well know a Christian should not be bitter. Josh, you are also speaking to the human side, and the truth is, all of us have emotions, and that is why we're doing this now. So me as well, I'm going to answer more of that because we're going to go through a number of bitter heart, humble heart issues, and then we're going to, if we have time, depends on where we reach. But I'll be giving more details of how to approach a person like that. Because as I even began to say before I got to this slide, that for some people, it's going to take a while. You have to keep drenching them because if, depending on how, for instance, there are some people that will take more time than others. For instance, somebody who is raped by a church brother.
Our sister.
Yes, our sister. God forbid, eh? A church brother or a church sister are raped by a pastor, for instance, molested by a pastor. Those things leave scars on people, you know. And it is difficult for you to be able to tell them to trust another pastor again or trust another church brother or sometimes even God. Even though we can say it, what I'm saying, some of these people that are in this position, you're going to have to address it over time. What we don't do is that we don't let up. In other words, you have to keep drenching them with it and you have to keep, and then you remember my opening statements to everybody. I said to you that we have to handle it in a way and address it in a way that we remind them that God still loves them, still cares for them, even if they're resisting it. We have to address it in a way that we don't seem callous or insensitive to their situation. So we have to use our words carefully to say, I do understand what you're going through. And coming to you, Mr. Moran, one of the things we must do is that we must, because sometimes we don't do this. Sometimes we're talking about he's a God of love and the stuff I'm going to say, but sometimes we don't call out the sin or the offense. So in other words, if you want them on your side, and if you want them to know that you understand, one of the things, for instance, going back to the rape issue, you would say, and what happened to you was wrong. You know, because sometimes we are trying to just say, God is love and God is going to help you through this. I want to address the offense as being wrong. No, we know it's wrong, you know, but we forget to echo that. And I'm saying if we want to win them over, to let them know that we are sensitive to what happened to them, we must call out the sin too and say, that's wrong. And I want you to understand that it shouldn't have happened. You understand? And then that's how you cross over with them, you know. You start even with that. That shouldn't have happened to you. In fact, I come into you, Mr. Moran, I haven't forgotten you. I'm a strong advocate. Every time I hear, and I'm just going to tell you my heart, every time I hear, for instance, somebody, what's the word, confessing, it's not even confess, but exposing, because it's not something they do wrong. Every time I hear on television, especially Jamaican shows, where some women in particular are exposing some men in their life that either abuse them sexually or rape them, and some of these fathers and uncles. And I said to myself, I get angry. You know why? A lot of them rape the young ladies, leave them in a place where now they have to pick up the pieces and they're better. But the truth is some of them nothing still not come out of it. In other words, what I'm saying is that, boy, may I tell you, we need to, I'm not going to be popular when I say this, but sometimes when we talk to especially young boys or young girls that have been sexually abused and raped and so forth, we need to take it further than just simply saying to them that it was wrong and, God will help you through this. What about the consequences? There are a lot of them that have raped and molested people, and all that happens is that we just talk about it and expose them. Them for go to jail. Them for go to jail. It's rape. And a lot of them are getting away with it. The only thing now you can tie things back is that there's a God who saw that too and will just bring justice on your behalf. So the balance has to be there. Then the person will know that you understand. And then you can bring them back to what God can do. All right?
Just looking at a hypothetical case where you alluded to or you suggested like if a pastor or some church person would have raped or molested a person. No, you have been hurt and you're hurting over a period of time. And you might ask the question, why didn't God do something or why doesn't God do something? But you might not know what is happening in the person's life because the person might be going through a difficult time in terms of how God is punishing him. And ultimately, in terms of he naming the name of Christ as a pastor, God probably will just take him out in terms of how he's bringing disgrace to his name. So, let's say you move from St. James and went to St. Catherine. You have no tracking, no information of that person who did all of that to you. And you still continue to be in your state of disdain and sympathy and empathy and all of that. And you're vexed with God still. But you are not aware that God has punished or is punishing that person. So here's another twist to it because you are still upset and you are still vexed with God, you not knowing that that person is being punished or being in terms, him can't get no suitable job. In terms of him being a career person, have his degree, what have you, he just bouncing here and there. He's suffering. You might not know all of that, and ultimately, him probably just gone home. Father take him home. So that's another side to it, where you might not know the details to follow up of that person's life after he abused you. But God allowed him to suffer.
Yes, and in addition, coming to your past, Evan, that's why I go back to what I said. I love what you said, and in addition to that, that's why I must empower these people to also take it a step further. Some of them are waiting on God, and you have to lovingly say this to them. You ask what God is doing. You don't say it the way I say it now, but when you understand it and you find a way to say it, what are you going to do about the situation? Somebody raped you, that's a crime. Let me and you go to the police station. In other words, and you see what I'm saying? Because sometimes they might wait on God for do something, and even what God is doing, God has empowered us with laws. Am I making sense? Has empowered us with laws, and sometimes there is release and relief in justice, And sometimes we forget that part. It's not just about, I'm coming to your sister, Maron, and then Pastor Evans had his hand up before too. It's not just about helping the person pass the pain, but it is also due justice that should also take place depending on what the offense is. All right? Pastor Evans and then Sister Moran.
And even to Mazel's question, right? The bitterness, it's going to come naturally. It's going to come naturally. But one of the beauty about it, when you say have a better heart or a humble heart, is the idea that even you picked up the idea about rape. Look in the Bible, there are instances of rape, right? And stuff like that. And it just shows how God uses even that, right? So it is, if you choose to be bitter, is that you're telling God, say, even though you say it in your word and you say it, I don't believe you and I don't trust you. And one of the things is we just have to just, if we say we trust God, we have to trust him even when we don't understand what he's doing, right? So, so bitterness, if a bitter heart is basically you choosing not to trust God, even when he's sure in his word. Why does good thing happen to bad? Why does bad thing happen to good people? Why did Jesus have to die? Why did he have to go through that? And so it's like we can still show them scripture, but as you said, be compassionate and let them know so we understand and they will get their reward either here or on the other side, but they will not get away with it. And we just have to continue to just encourage them.
Yes. Sister Moran, is it off? Did you turn it off?
Sorry, alluding to what you said about when persons, for example, rape or children, I mean, the hurt that's left there, the scar, because I know of cases currently where students were molested, persons were molested, and like, I'm the mother, but you are my tenant, you live where I am. You do nothing about it, and it's as if you're hugging up this person. And at the same time, this child is hurting, and to the point where the child wants to commit suicide. It is such a hard ordeal. You know, just seeing what they're going through, and some of the things that these children are doing now, they are cutting themselves. One actually said to me, and I didn't understand, when she said, I'm going to heaven. And then another of her friends looked at me and said, you know what you mean, miss? Miss, she wants to kill herself and then kill herself. I got up because I said, this is a serious thing.
Yeah.
You know, and just hearing that side is something like this that happened. Being molested, and it was like the person is still at will, still floating around the place. You know, and this person, you're seeing that person every day. And that, I mean, this child is so bitter.
Yeah.
But then you can understand. Persons are, well, they are being counseled with, but as you said, these things need to be brought to the light.
Yeah.
And punishment so that some of these things can be, I mean, dealt with,
Yeah.
you know, with the individual who this act happened with.
Yes.
It's really tough though.
And even there are some, even when they get the justice, they are still hurting. And so the point of all of this too is to teach persons to not remain the victim, but become an overcomer. Because even when justice is gotten for some people, they are still hurting. And the idea is that talking about all of this is the attitude towards the trial is to try to get every person to the place where they are no longer a victim and a prisoner of their circumstances and their past, but to get past it.
Right, and you know, when you started talking, I remembered Roshan's death.
Who?
You know, my nephew.
Oh.
Yes,
You're frightened. Now what's going on?
No, my nephew.
We are thinking about, angles and say, wait.
No, and I was saying, you know, because at first it was so tough
Yes.
for me to face Tracy.
Yeah.
What am I going to tell her?
Yeah.
You know, but then God gave me the strength to say, look, whatever God does
Yes.
is best.
Mhm.
And, you know, eventually, because I know you were talking to her as well, because you were saying, like, why am I going to live? I don't need to go further now. I need to go with him. You know, it's so, I mean, in the moment, it's like you can see nothing else.
Yeah.
Why at 12, when he wanted to become this and that, and you know, and you say, why is father to leave at this point? Why was I alone? And you're going to be asking all the questions. But you know, just to reaffirm that whatever God does is always best. And if it was in his will, because that was what I said, for him to live, he would be here. God knows why. We don't understand. But then, by and by, we will. You know? It's really rough.
All right, good. Let's keep looking at the heart attitude towards trials, and let's look at another bitter heart here. All right. A bitter heart would say, God is all-powerful, so why is he letting me suffer? This is when the person gets personal now. You know, if God is so all-powerful, why is he letting me suffer? The humble heart is going to say, in God's perfect plan, he will perfect me through suffering. And Romans 5, verse 3-5 say it this way. It says, not only so, but we also rejoice in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, and perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not disappoint us. As King James says, doesn't make us ashamed. All right? Because God has poured out his love into our hearts by the Holy Spirit, whom he has given us. You see the idea there? The idea is that you're going to go through suffering, but God has still poured out his love in our hearts. And so we have to channel that love again. So, yes, he is going to allow us to go through something. And everybody goes through trials. Everybody, Christian or non-Christian. And those are some of the things that you as you talk to somebody or even yourself, you have to remind yourself about some truths about trials. And one of the truths is that everybody goes through trials. Remember, we talked about it earlier. Is how you're going to handle it that is going to be the most important issue. Let's look at another bitter heart. It says here, I seem to suffer more hardships than others. It doesn't seem fair. And you know this is one of the tricks of the devil, right? To make us feel like we are the only one and we are the worst one. Ours is special and unique. We're worse than everybody else, you know? But a humble heart is going to say, I am no different from others. God allows all his children to suffer. That is a timeless truth that we must reiterate in ourselves as Christians and to other Christians and to non-Christians as well. Because there are times when some unsaved people will say that, boy, you know, you people seem to be specially protected by God. We probably are, you know, but what I'm saying is that we are not excluded from suffering. And even though the verse is not there, the Timothy verse, you remind them that they that live godly shall suffer persecution. But 1 Peter 5 verse 9, this is coming off of 5 verse 8 that says the devil is like a roaring lion seeking whom he may devour. And then he reminded them that, listen, your brothers, you know that your brothers throughout the world are undergoing the same kind of sufferings. So same kind, you know. So when you think yours is unique, others are going through the same kind. That Solomon said it a long time. There's nothing new under the sun. When somebody loses their 7-year-old child in Jamaica to death, there's somebody else in Jamaica who lost that too, or somebody else in another part of the world. In other words, it is not unique. It is not unique. It is not like the devil has picked you out specially and let this alone happen to you alone. But that's the devil's trick, to make you feel say are you alone. And that is why, remember who? Elisha? Jah come before Shah. You can remember Elisha, you know? Yeah. So it's Shah, right? So Elisha got to the place where he thought that he was the only one, and then get to the place where Elijah. All right. When he was the only one, and God had to remind him that, no, you're not the only one left. And me alone. Why me? And he said, no, it's 7,000. All right? So don't let the devil fool you. Bitter heart. God has turned his back on me. You notice the statements get stronger and stronger. A bitter heart. This is where somebody really thinks that God has deserted them. And especially a child of God should never really say that. But children of God, sometimes a few of them end up saying this. You know, instead of saying God has turned his back on you, your humble heart should say, God is especially close to me when he knows my heart is hurting. Now look at the Psalm. Psalm 34 verse 18 says, the Lord is close. I think the King James said, nigh unto the brokenhearted. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. He's right there. What we have to do is stop believing the lie. He is right there. He's close to the brokenhearted. He's there, and he saved those who are in a crushed spirit. So he's right there. Another bitter heart. This one gets bitter and bitter as we go along. Life is cruel, and so is God. God is cruel. You know, you can't convince some people that he's a God of love, you know, because of what has happened to them. So the humble heart will say, I will accept both the joy and the suffering that my loving Father allows to come into my life. Notice the use of the word loving. You're reminding yourself that God is loving, even in suffering. All right? You remember what Job said to his wife? Shall we accept good from the Lord and not trouble or not evil? In all this, Job did not sin in what he said and did not charge God or accuse God foolishly. My friends, this kind of encouragement starts within, you know. You have to believe this first in order to help somebody else. Because if you don't believe it, sometimes a weaker trial will come. And if you don't believe in this, you yourself will start to waver. And then when somebody, sometimes Christians still do it, you know. For them weaker trial, I batter them, you know, and them not angry, well, you know, but them have all of the counsel to tell somebody else. All of the counsel to tell somebody else. Just give me some around the mic. Go on, yeah.
I know we're zeroing in on the humble heart and the bitter heart. But let's look at the bitter heart person. I mean, in scenarios like these where they are to the extreme, they highlight how cruel God is and all of that. But under normal circumstance, they don't say thanks for a meal. You say, like you go, you say, let's give God thanks for the meal. They don't give thanks for the meal. The rains come, and they complain. We're rain again. And so, when God is giving all the blessings and giving everything, they see no reason to be grateful and to say thank you. But when something turns in a definitive way against them, you hear the complaints. So I'm just saying, even though we're highlighting the two contrasting sides, for the person who is bitter, even in good times, you don't hear anything positive coming from them.
Mm-hmm. And so therefore they will all be negative. But that's a good perspective to spin back on them, to let them realize that too and start to count the blessings. All right? Keep going. All right. Bitter heart. The bitter heart says all trials and sufferings are the result of sin. This doesn't always come from somebody who is bitter, you know, but it can come from somebody who is ignorant. The person here doesn't always have to be bitter. They might just be ignorant, or another word is judgmental. Sometimes this person is really bitter, judgmental, and ignorant at the same time. Like, they see this person going through that and say a sin in your life, or they are ignorant of what God's word says. The humble heart says, in contrast, God often allows the innocent to suffer in order to display his grace. And we've been saying that from day one. So, like for instance, the man who was born blind, he says, because remember the people were asking, who sinned? Him or his parents? And Jesus said, none of them. Neither this man nor his parents sinned, said Jesus. But this happened, he was born blind, so that the work of God might be displayed in his life. You can use him as an example. You can use Job. Job's accolades were laid out by God, you know, to tell you that Job is perfect and upright. Remember, the commentary is not coming from anybody else but God, you know. So God must know when somebody good. And then all of this happened to Job. Joseph, good people, you know, Paul and others. You can think about some others that it is not because of anything they have done in terms of the consequences of their sinful actions. They that live godly shall suffer persecution. This is a very good point that you need to reiterate with people who feel like God is giving them and rubbing them hard. Now, we also need to, because I don't think it is in this any at all, but you also need to lovingly point out to some person that sometimes they are suffering because of sin. Like what you said earlier, Mr. Moran, some of these ones who molest and so forth, and then them go suffer. And you know, most of them are suffer. Some people are suffering as a consequences of their actions. I remember I was telling somebody even recently that sometimes there are some stepfathers and fathers and uncles that have raped, molested some people, and nothing has come out of it, and no one is around them anymore. And listen, I want to deal with this carefully, so I'm taking out my glasses. Sometimes some of these persons now end up all alone and suffering. And sometimes out of our, and I'm using the word lovingly, out of our ignorance, we say, how nobody now come around Mass George and so forth, and Miss Jane and sorry. How all of him family, just desert him so. And I want us to be careful about how we set things too, because sometimes that's how God has designed it, as there are consequences. I'm serious. They are left alone because that's God's design for them to now suffer and stew in it. And can I say something else too? No, if the Spirit leads you to go and help them, you go and help them, because you still must love your enemy and help them and so forth. But sometimes if we're not careful, we're going to interfere. You understand me, Sister Bev? Sometimes we go there, go interfere. And we are, listen, don't miss me up, We go there because we're sorry for them, and we are making their life better when God didn't want them to be. Am I making sense? And we go there, we are interfere with God's suffrage process for them.
So, in the same breath, sometimes the people who see on the road begging,
yes.
sometimes you have to be careful how you give them money and who you give.
Yeah,
Because you don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there was a particular guy,
yeah.
I knew him from when I used to go to Jared Park, go watch football match. And he was up, and you see him on the road begging, and when we check some other guys, it's like him the ranks up a country.
Yeah.
And come up street now, destitute.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, man. That happened all the time. A lot of the time, some of these people were wicked people. They did some stuff, they got away with it, so to speak, and nobody says anything. After a while, is years after somebody bust, but them not done on time, no jail time, nor nothing. And then you wonder how they must suffer so much. Because there's a God up above who is just and seeing the things. So it's not everybody that is innocent is suffering. All right? Some people have been evil and they're suffering because of it. All right? What these evil people need to do when they are suffering as a consequence is to turn their lives over to the Lord and repent and make it right with the others they have offended. Pastor Evans, you were trying to say something? Okay, all right. All right, let's keep going. We're not going to finish this tonight, but we'll see if we can finish the bitter heart, humble heart scenario. Sometimes a bitter heart says, God has failed me by not removing these difficulties from my life. The humble heart should say instead, God will deliver me. Please note this term, note the phrase. God will deliver me in the trial, though he may not move me out of the trial. Can somebody explain to me how he can deliver you in a trial, but not out of a trial? The 3 Hebrew boys. So he empowered them. He gave them opportunity. They went through the fire, but they were not harmed. Just like how you can go through a storm and you have peace in the storm. Paul with the thorn in the flesh, my grace is sufficient, right? Job says, 36 verse 15, those who suffer, he delivers in their suffering. He speaks to them in their affliction. They're still in it. One of the points that we're going to make, if I don't get to it tonight, I'll say it now and say it another night. The idea of the grace that God gives to go through suffering. Some people don't want that grace. We would rather escape the suffering. I understand that part. It is not even, in my estimation, sinful to want to escape or not go through suffering. I don't think it is wrong. Who really wants that? But the idea is that you're in it, and God wants to use it to manifest, sprinkle, shower his grace and his abundant sufficiency upon you to show you how I can take you through this. Yes, Sister Moran. Yes. Yes.
So they are at peace.
Yes.
And I mean, like I said, passing on encouragement to you. You think they would be like bitter or
Yes.
no.
Mm-hmm.
And so God gives them that grace and that peace. So
Yes.
even though they are in that,
Yes.
they are still at peace.
Ray Bowles says it best in the song. The anchor holds though the ship is battered. So it is not trying to make it look like them not go through no problem. I will not have. The ship is battered, but the anchor holds. This is what you're trying to answer somebody who wonders why God allows. These are some of the things we're going to have to tell them. All right? And you must start by telling yourself first. So the bitter heart says, I cannot forgive God. There are some people who are angry at God, He could have prevented this. But the humble heart says, God will give me the grace I need. This is what I was alluding to all along. God will give me the grace I need to have victory in whatever He allows to happen in my life. Remember this verse from Sunday? Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. The worst thing you can do is to hold hard end on God. I'm coming to your brother. And you come out the loser if you're angry at God and fail to forgive God. You're not going to win that battle. You are the loser if you decide to be angry at God. You're not going to win that. Pastor Evans, go ahead.
And one of the things, if you notice with the bitter heart is they're judging God by their standard.
Yeah.
And everything is about me. I don't care about nobody else. It's about me, what God will do with me. When it could be obvious in front of their eye that somebody else is suffering worse than them, but it's all about me. So it's like the bitter heart just basically is a selfish heart.
Yeah.
And just sees themselves and judge God and everybody else according to their standard. And, that what even make it worse.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It always does. It makes it worse. We have to find a way, especially those who have had legitimate crises in their lives and are hurting and, wrong was done to them, offenses that we've mentioned, like rape and so forth. We have to still find a way to make them understand this truth, that to remain hurt, to remain angry and bitter and all of those things will not help them. You have to find a way to put that in the message that I know something wrong has been done to you, but to remain this way is not going to be good for you. You have to make them understand the overcomer scenario, not a victim anymore, but an overcomer. All right. I'm gonna just stop there for after this. After showing you the slide after this, because I like this. The harvest of a bitter heart. So we looked at a bitter heart and a humble heart. But what happens when, somebody remains bitter? It is going to produce some seeds. Let me read what is here in the paragraph. God has already provided the grace for you to be triumphant through the most severe of trials. Yet many people allow seeds of bitterness to take root in their hearts. A bitter root will bear bitter fruit, the taste of which only increases your sorrow, which is what I was trying to tell you all along. So here's what the harvest of a bitter heart looks like. Look at these things. Seeds of bitterness. Now, before I read them out, please understand that not all of them are sins. But these sometimes what I would call are either consequences of a bitter heart or factors which are produced from a bitter heart. So for instance, why I say not all of them are sin, like destructive anger is, but depleted energy might not be sin. They say, but what are not sin, Pastor? You remember the bitter heart was sin. And your bitter heart is causing you to deplete your energy. Yeah, it has sapped you. So what I'm saying is that I'm not saying all of these are sin, but a bitter heart can affect you. Am I making sense now? And cause your energy to be depleted, and then your emotions to be drained. All right? And your joy to be diminished, and you get depressed, you have a depressed outlook, and then damaging accusations. A bitter heart is very accusative in the wrong direction and to the wrong people. God causes our so and so, blame shift, and everybody, just like what Sister Moran had said earlier, when something tragic happens, many people try to figure out what could have been done. If we didn't know whose fault is this, who could have stopped this? Decreased interest, bitter heart, seeds of deep bitterness, deteriorating self-worth, leading to suicide, a desire to escape, and then distrust of others. Now let's go back to that one. I remember I had said it much earlier. Again, that is not a sin, desire to escape. But why is it there? And I'm going to explain that one to you carefully. a desire to escape is not bad or sinful. As I said, most of us, I only Paul me know most of the time talk about one running us. Paul, where the suffering there? Most of us do not want to suffer, and that is fine. That's okay. That's natural, normal, and it's unsinful. It's not sinful. But why is it there? A person who is extremely bitter, coupled with the desire to escape something that they are not out of. Get me now, You're not out of the trial, Your desire to escape and you're bitter. Every time you think about why you're in this situation and you say, what starts to happen is that you want to escape and it's still there. You start to curse God. You start to take on matters into your own hands. And even sometimes some people resort to suicide too because you want to escape the trial. So this is where the desire to escape can become bad because remember it's from the seeds of bitterness, a number of things start to pop into your head. God is not doing anything to help me get out of it, so let me help myself to get out of it. And suicide, robbery, you name it, sometimes people resort to crime, whatever their situation is. Sometimes the desire to escape, they resort to ungodly methods. So the desire to escape in itself is not the bad thing, but it is coupled with a bitter heart that ends up being irrational. Am I making sense? So we have to watch that one. We have to watch that one because that's the creeper for some Christians, The desire to escape and your heart already bitter and you're angry at God. You might end up doing something that is ungodly. Then there's the distrust of others, as was mentioned, and the doubt of God in himself, and then distracted from your priorities, and then deadened spiritual sensitivity. That last one there is as a result of a heart that has gone cold altogether now. They don't want to come to church. If they do come, they come out of formality. There's nothing happening in their life. They're not feeling the Spirit. They are not, engaging in anything with worship. A lot of the times, people, when they get to this place, don't even come to church. And some of the times, depending on who you are, they'll give you a story. They'll tell you, you'll see the bitterness coming out, while others will just give you an excuse. I don't want to tell them business. But they're angry. But none of these things in and of themselves, if they are produced by bitterness, is going to help somebody. So when we come back next week, we are going to look at answering some more of what Maisel and others asked. We're going to look some more at the idea of, how the purpose of trials. What do we learn from it? How can we turn a trial into a testimony? How can we turn suffering into service? How can we turn, these things into good things, even though they are bad? Because listen, I want to end by saying this. Sometimes some of the things that God allows people, and we have to be honest with this one too, that God allows people to go through are not good. Yeah. Are not good. In other words, if your loved one is tragically killed, somebody murdering him is not good, or murdering her is not good. Is that good? So we need to make sure that we put that in there for people to understand that the thing that somebody being raped, not good. So we must remember to tell people that, yes, God allowed it. It's not good, but it doesn't mean that God is bad. You have to communicate that clearly and to say what happens is that even a bad thing, a good lesson can come out of it. And sometimes it is difficult to find the lessons to make people believe it. But as it says here, Romans 8 verse 28, and we know that together for good. All things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. So when it says all things work together for good, all things include bad things. All things include some good things as well. So we must remember to be honest with people. Any questions, comments before we wrap up? All right. So that's it for tonight. Next week we will pick up on the idea of the purpose of the trials in order to properly get past them and help somebody else get past them. Let us pray. Father, thank you for the time. We definitely know that we needed this. We definitely know that these are hard times. These are harsh times. We definitely know that we all are going through something. Some of us are going through different things. Some of us are going through the same things, and some of us are going through multiple things. But God, you have said in your word in many places that your grace is sufficient in different ways. And you give it more grace. And you will not allow us to go beyond what we are able to, or what you are able to take us through. And you are able to take us through anything. You are able to talk us through anything. And you are able to keep us through anything. And so help us to believe this first, so that we can help somebody else to believe it also. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.